Okay, Champions of Champions boxing talk. Well, you know, in England, it takes a long time to wait for a bus. Many of them are late. And when one arrives, generally another one arrives just a few seconds later. Kind of like them deja vu moments when you're thinking about a person that you haven't spoken to for a long while, and then lo and behold, your mobile phone goes off and they call you. Well, Vladimir Klitschko announced his retirement, and it looks like this sort of thing has come in threes. Timothy Bradley is rumoured to have decided to call it a day. And now we know that Juan Manuel Marquez has retired from boxing. Let's just stick on the subject of Marquez for the purpose of this video. Let me just say, boxing in terms of talent, I believe, is in a very good shape with Mikey Garcia, Terence Crawford, and Mr. Lomachenko, who fights later on tonight. But there's no question there are certain people in boxing, and this guy more so than Vladimir Klitschko, to be honest, that you will genuinely miss when they're gone. There are fighters in boxing that you respect. Bernard Hopkins, Floyd Mayweather. Guys whose talent is undeniable, but you see, they only just do enough, don't they, to be successful. You kind of leave the arena or you switch your television set off by the end of their fights thinking they fought more for themselves than for you. Now Juan Manuel Marquez, to me, fights for himself and for you. I'll tell you for why. More knockouts than Floyd Mayweather. More attempts at knocking people out than Hopkins. Right? And Juan Manuel Marquez was a technician. A guy that used his boxing IQ. There was a little bit of Floyd Mayweather method in Marquez. They're completely different, I know. But there was an intelligence that Andre Ward possesses. And then there was the attacking ability and the willingness to get into wars for the public that Manny Pacquiao had. That to me is commendable. I think it's tragic that when you look at Juan Manuel Marquez's pay-per-view numbers, you see 5 million buys plus, but most of them were against the Filipino legend, wasn't they? And against Floyd Mayweather. And then you see other fighters that don't give nowhere near as much in the ring, and they sold more. Really, obviously, the fights of Marquez's career that define him are the Manny Pacquiao for particular contests. Now, the first one is very dramatic in the early stages, isn't it? I don't know of any other fighter, and let's face it, guys like Eric Morales and Marquez are the only elite fighters, yes, the only elite fighters of that particular space in boxing history that managed to beat prime Manny Pacquiao. No, Jeff Horn did not beat prime Manny Pacquiao, and in truth, neither did Floyd Mayweather. But Juan Manuel Marquez gave prime Manny Pacquiao every time he fought him a very good matchup indeed. The first fight, Marquez is floored 3 times. The first round should really have been scored 10-6. Manny Pacquiao should have been 4 rounds up after the first round. It was a real big blunder by the judge, and ultimately, I think it cost Manny the win. The fight was deemed a draw at the end, but forget that controversy happened. Even if you think Juan Marquez managed to fight his way back to lose by 1 point, which is what I believe, to be dropped that heavily 3 times in 1 round and come back shows you what a Mexican warrior this guy really is. Right? And he didn't just get up from the canvas swinging for the trees like a warrior, Marquez. No. He steadied his ship. He had a think to himself, had a good talk with his boxing IQ. And in that first fight, Manny Pacquiao was not as complete a fighter as he later became in the late 2009, 10, 12, etc. He was more of a one-handed fighter. And Marquez managed to get back into the fight by limiting Manny Pacquiao. Marquez's right hand and counter-punching ability and his willingness to show Manny Pacquiao, hey, I'm a Mexican and I can fight too and I can think. And every time you throw, boy, something will come back when you stop. Most people were dead on their feet or dead on the canvas when Manny Pacquiao dropped them at that particular time. The perception of Manny Pacquiao back then was very different from the one we see today, when he's fighting bigger guys and he's got good punching power, but in the lighter weights, he was like a far better southpaw version of Mike Tyson. The man was absolutely ferocious. Nearly on his day, unstoppable. Ask Barrera. Ask Lebuada. But Marquez just had this recipe that negated Manny Pacquiao. And right hands, a fantastic combination puncher Marquez, a fantastic counter combination. We see Floyd Mayweather, don't we? Throw counters, but it's single shots. And if you look at the statistics of all the good fighters Marquez fought, including Manny Pacquiao, if you get a guy like Manny Pacquiao who could in his prime throw 1,200 punches, Marquez could somehow make Manny Pacquiao's volume dip, where other world-class fighters, Miguel Cotto, Ricky Hatton, the list goes on, Eric Morales, all had to take volume and lever from Manny Pacquiao. But Marquez just seemed to have Manny's number in that sense. And Manny seemed to have Marquez's number. We could be watching these two guys, two thinking greats. And here's the great thing about Marquez. When Manny Pacquiao did eventually become more of a complete fighter, Marquez still found a way to make the fights competitive. In fact, in the third fight, Marquez was not dropped at all. And of course, we all know about the fourth fight, don't we? Now, I know there are going to be Pacquiao fans that, well, Marquez has had suspicion raised about him, like Manny's had suspicion raised about him. But we really don't have any evidence that Marquez was on stuff. It's all hearsay. You're allowed to think what you think. Fair enough. But we can't 100% concrete convict Marquez of any suspicion, shall we say, to do with PEDs or anything like that within the sport of boxing. Just like we can't with Manny. But anybody that says that they couldn't see a potential for Marquez one day doing that kind of thing with Pacquiao, Well, I think he's rather crazy because all 3 of the previous fights were competitive. So the 4th one was going to end in knockout. I mean, Marquez was busted up, wasn't he, by Manny Pacquiao? Really badly. Had Manny Pacquiao stopped Marquez, which he may have done, because he looked on the way out when he was taking so many left hands, and Manny Pacquiao's like Spider-Man reflexes seemed to be for the first time solving the Marquez puzzle. And Manny Pacquiao shown his completeness when he landed a vicious short right hook on the inside, which wobbled Marquez, but the Mexican warrior held on. I don't think he's ever been stopped in his career, so had Manny Pacquiao managed to knock out Marquez then, people would have said that Manny Pacquiao was on drugs during that fight. But we can't convict people when we don't have pure factual evidence. But let's admire that 4th fight as the classic it was. And it's not the only Marquez classic we've seen. Excuse the people screaming outside. It's Saturday night. We've never had one before, have we? Casamayor fight. The Casillas fight. Joel Casamayor. Fights that Marquez had been badly dropped in. This was not just a thinking fighter. This was a thinking fighter that managed to apply his thoughts during adversity. Right? Casillas really rocked Marquez. Baby Bull really rocked Marquez early on and was throwing hell for leather. Shout out to Richard Dwyer. He said something and I hadn't really noticed it before, but when I was watching a few old clips of Marquez before on YouTube, Dwyer said that Marquez sometimes would fight as though he's watching his own event, like he's, I suppose I'll throw my 10 cents on this, like Marquez's soul had astral projected itself out of his body and watched the fight as it occurred. And he would be getting punched, but still be studying the event as he's getting hit. Then, when he'd figured the code out, his soul would sort of come back into his body, stop watching his own fight, and then he would apply it physically then to his opponent once he'd figured the code out. Like with Baby Bull, it was that short uppercut on the inside, wasn't it? With Casillas, the Australian, it seemed to be the same. And he was very happy to break guys down. There was never a sense that Marquez was in any rush. Everything he seemed to do, sometimes even when he got hurt, seemed to have a purpose. Right? With Manny Pacquiao, it was that right hand. And it was the combinations that when Manny Pacquiao had finished throwing, the other people, when they were hit by Manny Pacquiao, Joshua Clottey, for example, they didn't want to throw anything back. They wanted to stay nice and safe. But Marquez thought, I'm in more danger of losing being safe than taking a risk. And when Pacquiao stopped, he let his hands go. And he seemed to have his rhythm. Unlike any fighter I've seen. And he could go to war with Marquez. We never seen Floyd go to war with Manny Pacquiao. Floyd used what he's got to get through the fight, to negate it. But we've seen Marquez do well on both aspects, in IQ and in his physical approach. And his Mexican pride meant that when he was hurt, he would always answer back. And that was the difference between Floyd Mayweather and Marquez. I know Floyd Mayweather beat Marquez comprehensively. And I'm not really going to get into that. But as I've said, Manny Pacquiao now himself has one fight remaining, I believe, and that's the Jeff Horn rematch. Marquez now has retired. His descendants, Lomachenko and Mikey Garcia and Keith Thurman and all of these young guys. What's remarkable about today's boxing, though, is Marquez was a world champion in 4 different weight classes, winning 56 fights out of 64 bouts, I think. Losing on 7 occasions. But of course, many elite names, Timothy Bradley, Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, had beaten Marquez. But Marquez had beaten, as I said, Barrera, Casamayor, Manuel Medina, who Nassim Hamed took 11 rounds to beat. Marquez did it in 7. It was a destruction. But Adrian Broner is a 4-weight world champion. And I don't see where these two guys are related. I really don't. It could be me, but Marquez may be one of the finest 4-weight world champions I've ever seen. And one of the greatest Mexican or pound-for-pound fighters, for that matter, I've ever seen in the history of boxing. And underestimated Marquez was his ability as well, again, to figure things out and not just go to war, but he would throw shots to the head, he would throw shots to the body, he would use uppercuts, straight right hands. He wasn't a great volume puncher as such, but he made you feel, even though he's a thinking fighter, that there was great action around the corner at any moment in his fights. And that, for a boxing fan or for a casual who is watching, is splendid indeed. Marquez is one of the best 4-weight world champions of all time. Adrian Broner, for me, is perhaps the worst 4-weight world champion I can think of. And that's not saying Adrian Broner is a bad fighter. He's not. But what does it tell you? You have to watch boxers closely. You just can't go off statistics. You used to really have to be something in the sport to win belts in that many weight classes. You had to be Marquez level, Floyd Mayweather level, Manny Pacquiao level to go up 8, 5, 4 different weight classes. Lomachenko's legacy will be like these guys, because in just 7 or 8 fights he broke the record for winning belts in 2 weight classes. This is more of a guy that is a descendant of Marquez and Pacquiao, not always in terms of style, but in terms of how great he is, than an Adrian Broner. And yet, because we're in an era of silly reality films, Big Brother, Love Island, when you get someone like Adrian Broner that can talk, he gets more publicity, unfortunately, than Lomachenko. And Marquez, unfortunately, suffered the same a little bit in that era. He should have been more famous outside of the Mexican boxing community than he was. People were more interested in Floyd Mayweather accusing Manny Pacquiao of taking steroids, when all said and done. And that fight itself was called the fight of the century. Mayweather-Pacquiao. Let me tell you something. The Marquez-Pacquiao fight, or fights, were the real fights of the century. Marquez, we will miss you from the sport of boxing. I don't think we'll see the likes of this guy for a long, long time. He really was unique. But again, like Vladimir Klitschko, it was on the cards because after his win over Mike Alvarado, who again, he hit very hard with a great counter right hand on the temple, and Alvarado nearly fell out the ring. People didn't really associate Marquez as being a puncher like Cotto and Canelo, but let me tell you something. He was a very underrated puncher. puncher. Those punches in the first 3 Pacquiao-Marquez fights shown once again what a chin Manny Pacquiao has. Because not many would take them shots. The Floyd Mayweather fight where Marquez landed clean shown what a chin Floyd Mayweather has. And again, if Marquez, a guy as clever as that, can't beat Mayweather, I don't see Conor McGregor doing it. So, the injuries plagued Marquez at the end. We didn't see him for a few years. But for me, easily in the top... He's in the top 4 or 5 best Mexican fighters of all time. And we know there have been many of them. Personally, I rank him above Marco Antonio Barrera. Eric Morales. Yes, I do. Slap because of his... Not just because of his fights with Pacquiao, but that's the one that puts him slightly over the edge, in my opinion, ahead of Eric Morales. Canelo Alvarez, is he better than Canelo Alvarez? Well, Canelo has a long way to go, but Canelo has got to make this Golovkin fight at least competitive to even begin to start that argument. So, Marquez, a true Mexican legend, a true great of the sport, and a true all-time great who will no doubt be in the Hall of Fame. And when a guy like this retires, you really know that an end of an era is near. Champions of Champions Boxing Talk. Sadly, Marquez has retired, and I'm out.